Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for being here today as we host another iteration of our Insight to College webinar. My name is Devin Simmons, and I am thrilled to be the STEM Lyceums Program Manager. I'm excited to dive into today's event where you'll gain valuable guidance for academic and career journeys. I encourage you to take notes throughout the session to capture actionable tips that will assist you in future endeavors. And this is our STEM Lyceums webinar. And a little bit more information on the Center for Excellence in Education. CEE was founded in 1983 by Joann DiGennaro and the late Admiral H.G. Rickover, who is the father of nuclear navy and civilian uses of nuclear power, with a mission to nurture high school and university scholars to careers of excellence and leadership in STEM. CEE's mission is to nurture high school and university scholars to careers of excellence and leadership in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and encourages collaboration between and among scientific and technological leaders in the global community. Programs for teacher and students include the Research Science Institute, USA Bio Olympiad, Teacher Enrichment Program, and STEM Lyceums Program. More about our cost-free programs on the next slides, which is the Research Science Institute is a highly competitive 6-week summer science and engineering program open to rising high school juniors. High school seniors, and juniors are eligible to apply. RSI is the first cost-free summer science and engineering program that combines on-campus coursework and scientific theory with off-campus work in science and technology research. The USA Bio Olympiad is the premier biology competition for high school students in the United States, provides the motivation, curricular resources, and skills training to take them beyond their classroom experience to the level of international competitiveness. Since CEE began administering the USA BO in 2003, every member of the USA Bio Olympiad team has medaled at the IBO. And then next we have the Teacher Enrichment Program, which provides opportunities for middle and high school teachers to connect with leading experts from industry and academia, explore cutting-edge research and development, and make meaningful professional links with direct benefits for you and your students. And then STEM Lyceums is the newest initiative at CEE, which is a virtual club for high school students to engage in discussions and explorations of STEM concepts of career pathways, and also provides scholarship and internship resources to students nationally and internationally. And now, today we have as our speaker, who I mentioned earlier, who is our co-founder and president, Joann P. DiGennaro, Esquire, and she has dedicated over 4 decades to advancing STEM education across the globe. In 1983, as mentioned before, she co-founded the Center for Excellence in Education alongside the late Admiral H.G. Rickover with the mission of supporting the development of high-achieving students in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. As president of CEE, Ms. DiGennaro is dedicated to nurturing students towards excellence in both STEM and business while fostering international collaboration among emerging leaders in these fields. The organization, a nonprofit, has built strong educational partnerships with 56 countries, including landmark initiatives in China, India, and Saudi Arabia. Ms. DiGennaro's contribution to education have earned her recognition as one of the top 100 U.S. women leaders in STEM by U.S. News and STEM Connector. She has served on numerous academic boards, including Purdue University, George Mason University, Schimmer College, and the Keck Graduate Institute of Life Sciences and National Defense Unit. Internationally, she has led efforts such as the Saudi Research Science Institute at KAUST, the first co-educational STEM program in Saudi Arabia. She holds degrees from Purdue University, the University of Maryland, and George Mason University, and has completed additional studies at Oxford. She also has a research affiliate at Harvard. And now Ms. DiGennaro will go into more about the college application process and colleges in general.
It is just wonderful to be with you today. I'm anxious to talk to you about my favorite topic, the college application process, and how I've devoted my life to helping students like you to get into your dream school, hopefully, but to pursue successfully your career of your wishes. I'm going to, this presentation is a primer for understanding holistically the application process. I will talk about what I consider some of the most important issues you need to pay attention to in your application, but I am also going to further explain some of the big names that are talked about in the application process so that you fully understand what you're doing and you can do it successfully. Next slide. Next slide. Here I have placed several universities, colleges and universities on this slide. This year, of course, and recently, the status of who is first, the top 10 universities, has been published. Princeton took #1, and of course, Harvard is still in the top 5 or 6, but MIT and Stanford certainly take a lot of pleasure in their rankings. What you need to see in those rankings, maybe some of you have not noticed Wash U in St. Louis that often, Vanderbilt or Hopkins. They're in there, and Emory, because they also lead the colleges and universities in research money for STEM. Johns Hopkins has been top in the United States with some Cal system schools with DoD research funds. And WashU, Vanderbilt, and Emory, of course, have enjoyed corporate funding for many, many years. Keep in mind these schools as we talk about what it will take, the next slide, to get admitted to a top tier, a good institution. Now, I bulleted those things that are premier in what you need to look at. But #1, I would like you to know that not all schools are doing interviews because of cost. Now, should you not get an invitation for an interview, do not be concerned. You don't ask for an interview. Sometimes they don't have interviewers near where you can meet with them, or they've not expended funds to do interviews in that area, or perhaps they are sure about their thoughts of you and they don't have some other questions to ask. So it's not obligatory to have that interview. Your standardized tests, of course, SAT, ACT, and your APs are important. Now, these, even when they are optional, you take the tests and turn in those scores, if those scores are good. And you may take the SAT more than once or the ACT, but know that for the Ivies, you're going to need above a 1500. In some cases, it could be a 1550, depending on where you're applying, if it's an Ivy or one of the top schools. Now, if there are international students listening in, I would like to say that for the first time, we had a difficulty with a student who turned in from another nation and said they didn't take the SAT, the ACT, but they were IB, and then said no other tests, but they had competitions, etc. One, they were trying to get into, I will tell you, Harvard. Well, Harvard telephoned me and said, did you know that this student took international tests and didn't do well? I was so embarrassed because I had not been told, and we didn't ask other than about the tests that we historically use. Well, he did not get into Harvard, but I will tell you, whatever tests you have taken, if they ask specifically about a certain test always tell the truth. Now, you can see from the other issues going down, there is nothing new, you know this, but I will say in competitions, if you are wanting a STEM career, you should have had research completed. Many students do from middle school. But for instance, MIT has a proclivity to really like to see gold medals in international competitions. And of course, the leading competition, the Regeneron in the US, and all the Olympiads are very important if you have a medal in those competitions. Your disabilities, make sure that if you have a diagnosed disability, that you are making sure the school knows that, because they are also looking to help students that have had difficulties because of a disability. Now, here there are so many questions that you could be asking in that how to get admitted. We'll talk a little bit more about it as I go on. But now I'm going to define some of the terms so you'll know holistically what you're getting into. Next slide. A lot of times we use college and university in the same breath because we think they mean the same thing. A college, there can be several colleges within a university. And certainly you can see that if you're looking at Oxford in England. I attended St. Edmund's, the small, oldest college at Oxford, but Oxford is the university. Universities are always larger and more independent than colleges, and they have more options, degrees, students attending, etc. So even though the word may be used interchangeably, note that there is a difference, and a university is a much more global, encompassing experience. Next slide. Ivy League schools doesn't mean it just has ivies growing on the building, although many do. People think of the ivies with academic excellence, more difficulty in getting in, and socially giving you more opportunities. I've listed the Ivy League schools, and that's important because if you're applying early, you cannot apply to more than one Ivy school because they share lists, and you can combine. Of course, there are many schools when you're applying early. Should you be applying early to Harvard, you can still apply to many like George Washington University, Colgate, etc. So you have to know in the guidelines of the school whether you're allowed to apply to other schools in the Ivy list. And most of them will say you can only go early to one. Next slide. Liberal arts does not mean just humanities, and many international students think of liberal arts as just humanities. Liberal arts from the Middle Ages, all time, means a holistic look at your education with physics, chemistry, math, literature, etc. So your liberal arts colleges are almost always show a connotation of being exclusively undergraduate, but also liberal arts colleges can offer advanced degrees. And I have put some of the liberal arts schools well known in a list. Next slide. Business school. Many schools, or smaller ones perhaps, don't have business schools. Your larger universities do, and of course, I have placed the names of those at the bottom. But be well aware that if you're applying to Harvard and you say you want to major in business, you're denied admission immediately because they don't have a major in business. It's up to you when you're applying to schools to know what you're applying to and what the school has. And when you're writing your essays, that you are making sure you are writing them with the idea of what that school has, offers, and what it would mean to go there. You're trying to let every school know when you're applying that you would fit and fit well in the community of those students. Now, when you're applying to schools, not just business, etc., think of business school in the MBA following your liberal arts degree. Okay, next slide. Pre-professional curriculum is interesting because it used to be when I was in school, you could go pre-med as a major. You could go pre-law, etc. No longer are those majors. In other words, for instance, for medical schools, they're looking for well-rounded, strong academic backgrounds. Anthropology is literature. As long as you have taken the bases, the base courses that you really must have to do well in medicine, chemistry, physics, biology. All right. And I will say there is one course that if you do not have a stat course at your school, secondary school, you take stat online because it is a strong indicator of your ability to manipulate math. Okay. Now, some of your better secondary schools will have a stat course, but if not, they're excellent ones online. Next slide. Public and private colleges. And that's an interesting, you hardly use, is it public, private? But indeed, your private schools like Harvard, like Stanford, do well as private schools with donors, corporations that have a close nexus to the schools. Your public universities are much larger and have much more state and federal funding than a private school. Now, also your public universities in a state will be mandated by the state legislature to have more students accepted from that state, and that's why they offer them lower tuition. Okay? Now, public colleges, even though some think that Berkeley is private, NYU, no, those are public, very fine schools. Now, when you're looking at, and I'll talk more about it with majors at different universities in a further slide. So there are your public examples of public and private schools. Now, next slide. Some of you may never have heard of a land grant school. And those were important in many of your state public universities are land grant, like Virginia Tech, like Purdue, like Michigan. And they were important as federally financed because they were set forth for the schools to offer agriculture, science, military science, and engineering, like Cornell. Okay. And when they're a land grant, they're getting special funding. But you know that most of the land grants are for instance, when I say the Big Ten, many of those are land grants. Okay, and at the bottom, I have listed some land grant schools. Next slide. The Big Ten, it's not important other than to say many people only talk about the Big Ten in terms of athletics. And indeed, some of you may be going to universities on an athletic scholarship. I've listed the Western and Eastern Division schools. And the Big Ten, you always see them because of the big bands they have, etc., and the big teams. Now, next slide. U.S. News and World Report, Forbes, Wall Street Journal list the top 50 colleges and universities. They use different indices in making their ranking. But if you look at the top 9, you see 3 9s, 12s, 15, 18. The top ones, they remain in the top 10 year after year after year. Princeton, for the first time in several years, is named the #1 school in the country. And you can see MIT and Harvard. But for some of the listings, Harvard dropped down the Wall Street Journal to #6, and Columbia jumped. So that's the U.S. News and World Report, the top 50 colleges and universities. And I urge you to look at the list because some of you may not think of considering Tufts, Lehigh, Wake Forest, very, very fine schools. And they are listed. And when you're applying, because you're going to be applying to probably 6 to 10 schools, consider this list. Now you see the next slide. Next slide. I'm sorry. Go back to the Wall Street Journal listing. Yes. There you see Columbia has jumped and Amherst is in there. One of the ones several of us were a little surprised, but they have been gaining in their record of employing their graduates and graduates being very happy, having done their undergraduate school at Babson. Okay, so there you see, I have listed up to 50 of the schools. Now, it also depends when you're looking at a school, what major you're thinking about. Because if you would say to me, I want computer science, so I'm applying to Harvard, and I would say, what are you doing about MIT in computer science? If you're interested in robotics, what are you doing? #1, Carnegie Mellon, chemistry, Notre Dame and Michigan. So, many parents have this dream in their head. Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Caltech, Princeton, Yale. They don't want anything else. That is not the case. And take a look at the schools. Some of them you may not even have heard of. Rose-Hulman, #17 in the Wall Street list. Very fine for engineering and math. Okay, so you have a lot of homework and research to do with the schools you're looking at. Don't just say, because my parents want me to go to Harvard, that's your number one choice. Unless you really want Harvard, you're qualified for Harvard, and they have the major that you want. All right, let's jump to the Seven Sisters. Now, it used to be the Seven Sisters when I was thinking of going to college were very strong because they were only schools for female students. Now there's some cross work where if you're at Barnard, you can also take you take work at Columbia. So there are some students who will say, I'm more comfortable at a female school offering STEM. And it is true, the Seven Sisters have produced more female STEM going on than most universities and colleges. However, the problem is when they get to graduate school, there has been a complaint among several females in the country that they weren't used to the competition and competing with males in the laboratories and classes. So, but they're very fine schools. They've been around a long time. And some of our students may be more comfortable looking at going to those schools. Next slide. Now, I have placed several slides in about the common application. If you have not reviewed the common application, do so very carefully. And why do I say that? Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. The reason I ask you to review the Common App is because you will be strong in some things, not as strong in other issues and items. You may not be as strong in competitions as you are in publications. Your extracurricular activities may not be as strong in something, the area very important, and that is the impact statement, the impact you are doing with your community project. Now, it's very important that they see what you are doing outside of the high school as well as inside. Now, you may want a STEM career, but because you're in an urban setting, you really didn't know how to get an internship or were unable to have an internship. Well, you can also do research online. There are many ways to skin that cat, as we say, with doing research. You get your parents to help you identify a faculty member. You ask your high school science teachers to help you do that. But the common application shows you what they are asking for sure in it. But you may say, geez, they didn't give me some way to put in what I'm doing with taking care of my grandmother, a very sick aunt. After school, that is what I'm doing. That's why I don't have some activities, as many activities. So you want to make sure then, after you complete what you put in that Common App, that you say, okay, something I'm doing that I couldn't find a place to put it in the Common App, I want to put it in my essay. Now, you know the essay subjects come out in early summer. You don't pick the one you think would be neat. You pick the one that will give you, has the most strength for you to write about. And the essay indeed is the most important, I can say, of all things in your application. Now, your essay, you're going to, we call it dumping garbage, your first draft. You're not sure what you want to say. You're not even sure of the subject you want for your essay. What subject area? So you're throwing everything in, and we call it the garbage bag, because then you're going to start whittling it down, throwing out some of the garbage. Eventually, it will hit you. This is what I want to say and what I want to focus on. And remember, in your essays, you can say, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. You don't put a bunch of subject areas into your essay. You're making sure it's parallel in structure, no grammar mistakes, and you don't want to do poetry or satire. Those are hard things. You want to write as if you're exposing your heart. Now, the Dean of Admissions, Undergraduate Admissions, Stanford, recently told me, I want students to expose their souls. I thought that was interesting. What they're saying is, in your essay, tell them something about yourself that the Common App doesn't have in it. Okay, don't repeat what you've already had written. There's so much. Each of you is a star in many ways, and you want to show them the global you. Now, they're looking for unique and creative applicants. Okay? Unique and creative applicants. Unusual things. Now, remember, go past the profile to if you want to say go to activities. I'm sorry. Now, in your application, now some of you will say, I think I want a STEM career, or I think I want to be a journalist. Well, your activities, a few of them must relate to the goal of which you are striving, okay? And I have students who will always say, oh, I only participate in 2 or 3 activities because I'm at an IB school, I'm in sports. Well, they're going to see your sports activities in your application. They're not looking for the number of activities as the consistency. They want to see how long you have pursued those activities, and they want to see your leadership in them. Are you captain of a sports activity? Have you won awards for writing? How many years have you been playing a musical instrument? Now, they're not interested in your just playing a musical instrument because most good students, it's piano, cello, violin, years of those activities. They want to see, did you write a concerto? Are you the head lead violinist? They want to see leadership and stardom in an activity, or the captain of a sport. Now, if you have not been able to participate in an activity for those reasons that I just mentioned, you let them know. And you have a place when you're looking at on your Common App about activities. Next slide. Those personal essays, as I said, are crucial. If you are applying early, which means deadline of November 1, and you haven't started writing your essay, shame on you. You should have been thinking about your essay this summer when you went in and saw the list of things you could write about. Now, in many instances, the listing doesn't change all that much. So, as I said, they're trying to know the inner you with your writing. And when they say 2 essays, they don't mean 4. You don't turn in extra things just because you think it will help you. It's just like your endorsers to the school, your recommendors. Usually they want 1 or 2 out of your high school plus the counselor. The 1 or 2 should be with professors and teachers that know you well, or you stayed in contact since your first year of high school. You did well, and they know you and can write about you in a very complimentary way. You also, if you want to major in chemistry or physics at the university, surely one of your writers and your endorsers would be the professor or teacher in that subject area, but not necessarily. Now, you can also use, of course, a coach if you were in sports. You can use, if you wrote in a journal with another writer, or you've done research previously and you're listed as a writer with a professor, you may use that professor. All right, so you want to think carefully about these things. Remember, the application is to sell you. Sell you. You are competing against thousands of very fine students like yourself. And the school is always looking to increase its underrepresented populations. So life is not fair. You may get a rejection from a school you thought you should have gotten in. You're going to get into a school of your choice if you've made the selection of the schools carefully, where you will fit. For instance, do you want to, in a small school, a large school? Do you want to attend where it's warm? You don't mind the cold weather. You want activities, you're very active in ballroom dancing. You're very active in squash, okay? You want to look at schools that have activities that you're going to enjoy. Now, why in that college search and activities, you want to look at schools that certainly have good endowments, good professors in the areas of study you're interested in, and indeed have offerings of internships or help for you to get internships in the summer. The college search is very important because it's not just that you are trying to identify your drop-dead dream school, but you're going to look at 3 levels. I always call it gold, silver, bronze level. And your dream school would be your number 1 choice if you have the qualifications. If you have received C's, I call them chrysanthemums, you're probably not going to get into one of the top schools, maybe the Ivies, because thousands of students are applying with a 4 or 4.4 or 5. But the college search, as I said, they're looking for several things. Now, besides your gold, in your silver category, They're very fine schools that are also top schools where you would have a very good choice of getting in. You're not sure between MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Michigan. Okay, those would be in your silver categories. Your bronze category is listing of a couple of schools where you're pretty sure your safety schools that you would get in. Always also think it's not the price tag that's listed in the school. That should not be your first consideration because there are many grants, loans, scholarships, and many times the colleges and universities at good schools, state schools, the tuition will be the same as an Ivy brought down with financial aid, etc. Okay, so next slide. The next slide. Okay. The common application requires these bullets listed. Now, I have had very fine students who have attended the Research Science Institute be denied admission because they did not check to see that the endorser, the recommendor, got his or her recommendation in on time. It is your job to ask the recommenders early on. You should have already asked them. And that once in a while you check to see if they've got them in. Now, the earlier you ask your recommenders, the better, because the best ones in writing are usually the ones that most students already know about, and they're going to those as well. And I can tell you from writing many recommendations, after you write 50 or 60, sometimes they all sound alike, and you feel like you're getting a little stale. So the recommenders in your file, you turn it in. Now, we had a student who MIT was his choice. He was so qualified. He did not get in a few of the things that were mandated. His high school transcript was not sent in. He was denied, and they would not reconsider. It is your responsibilities to get in all that they're asking for. All right? Now, after you've got your file in, you want, it's November or January, you may win some awards. You may have something published. You may be chosen as the president of an academic club or the captain of a sporting club. That is additional information which the school needs to know about. And you write the school very briefly and say, my application has already been submitted. However, I have additional information which I would like you to have. I have recently been X, X, Y, Z. Okay? So there you are, your requirements. They're not all of them, but the following are the most important. Okay? Then, next slide. Your maximum, now, if you're an international student, you know you need to take the TOEFL. And indeed, the TOEFL, the high score, is indeed, you see there, the 30s and the paper-based. You may take TOEFL more than once. Schools don't expect you to be perfect in your written in English, but they expect you to understand English, write well in English, because many times you're dependent on that in your listening and writing in the courses you take. Now, with the SAT, there you are, 800. 1600 is the combined score. And as I said, for the most qualified, I'd say 1550, no lower than 1530. For some schools, 1500. But of the best of the Ivies, you're going to need above the 1500s. The ACT, if you don't take the SAT, top is 36. You are expected to have all 36s. Maybe a slippage in one of them to 35, but mostly 36s. Okay. APs. You are expected to have taken APs if they are given at your schools. Or if not, you can take them at other schools, but the 5 on any AP is a denominator that compares you to other students across the country. Now, we have had students now, if you believe you want to be a physicist, then surely you'll take an AP in physics. I say take a few APs, 3, 4, in the subject areas you can do well in. Just don't say, oh, I'd like to take an AP in whatever. No, because APs are auxiliary. You're already having to do the ACT, the SAT, your grade point average, your activities, your essays. So the APs should be in subject areas where you're pretty sure you can get a 5. Now, I have had students that's unbelievable to take, a lot of them take 8 to 12. One student took 22 APs and got all 5s. That was the weirdest thing to me, because it's very hard to take that many APs, particularly to get all 5s. So take just a couple particularly geared toward what you believe is going to be your career. Now, should you get a 3, don't report it. Now, some schools, it may be the bronze range, will take a 3 for credit. They're looking for 5s at your best schools. Now, your IBs, of course, we know how busy you are if you're on an IP, but don't use the IP as an excuse. You still need all of those other qualifiers, although the schools do know the difficulties of APs and they honor the APs. Now, next slide. There are your regular admissions, January, early action, November 1. Now, you need to check because there may be a school you're applying to that has a little bit of wiggle room. It may be November 5th, November 10th, but almost all are November 1. Now, early decision. There are several schools that say you wanted to attend the school, you're accepted, and then they say you need to agree to attend that school. Now, you need to honor that decision that they say about early decision. I always say, hedge your bets, don't do early decision because the financial aid packages aren't announced until later in the spring. And you may have a couple of schools you're looking at. Just because you're admitted to a school, maybe in the bronze or silver area, don't hedge your bets and by just taking the school because you're admitted. Now, unfortunately, international students have been taking a beating in acceptances. They're about 10% are accepted. It really is lower than that. It's because they're using the scholarship money, and many international students need full scholarships, tuition, room, and board. And they have been giving those awards to underrepresented populations. We have 38 to 40 international students each year at the RSI, the Research Science Institute. Those students have to be among the top 10 achievers on their national examination, or gold, silver, or bronze medalists in Olympiads. It doesn't matter. Sometimes they're taking only 1 or 2 international students, and the Ivies took no more than 6 this past year. Now, some students say, well, I didn't get into my dream school, but I'd like to transfer. Well, I say, if you're going to a good school, if you're accepted at a good school, and you will be if you've done your homework and your fit is correct, then you want to complete your 4 years at the school because of the challenges when you transfer, of your curricula being out of sync. They don't have some of the courses you haven't taken. You've taken some that they don't require, etc. So I say, think of your dream school as getting into for graduate school. And graduate school is far more important than undergrad anyway. I can tell you that this past year, Harvard took only 12 transfer students in all the university. It's very hard and many times not necessary to transfer. Next slide. You can read about need blind, need aware. Most of the fine schools have a need blind acceptance. They don't care if you have to pay for it or don't pay for it. They're interested in getting the finest students. So you apply to the schools you want to go to. Paying is not the #1 priority. It's getting in and then working through all of those areas that I believe there has been a webinar from Mark Kantrowitz, who is one of the leading authorities in this country about financial aid. Now, needs sensitive, of course, that most schools, even if they're need blind, they're looking at how many need blind students are they going to take, and how many of need sensitive. So look at the listing there, but you really check with the schools if they have the need blind or need aware. Next slide. I've listed resources for international students because most parents of international students have always thought that students get into colleges based on their test scores and their academics, their grade point. And indeed, in some countries, that is still true. It is not true in the US. Our colleges and universities are trying to train leaders in different subject areas. And the biggest challenges in the world are multifaceted in that they're not dependent only on one subject area. And as physicists will tell you, they will say physicists are just engineers who are tinkering. Now, if you're applying to a school for engineering as an undergrad, as a US student or international student. You know, if an issue that I should have talked about was robotics. Many students are very active in robotics, but it takes a lot of time. However, most of your best schools will say, okay, you participated in robotics. You may use what you're saying is I could not participate in so many activities because I was very active in robotics. What they want to know is not that you were on a robotics team, and that's why they don't give robotics students that much of a break. They want to see who headed the robotics team and what you did for the robotics team. Okay? Because in the activities, many students will say, I just didn't have time to do things. Can't use that excuse. For your resources for international, and the next slide, I have resources just for reference on universities. Take a look at that. As you look at it and read some of the things, remember that if your school is saying, look at material in X book or by X, if it's more than 3 or 4 years old, that reference material, it's obsolete or things change. You need the most relevant, newsworthy, new information. Now, this information on resources and references, all of my presentation will be posted online. And Devin is heading the Lyceums. He can tell you where it's going to be and when it will be posted. And you can refer to this because you can't remember these things that I am telling you. Okay, the massive open courses. There I have also listed very important courses. And I always say, if a student said, oh, my school didn't offer STAT, no good. It's offered online. And for a STEM student, you need that STAT in your file, okay? So look at also the MOOCs. All right, next slide. The international competitions, of course, are important. And the teams and your participation in Olympiad means you went to the program where they took the top 20, perhaps, students in the country based on the national finals. Schools very much favor international Olympiads and medalists in them. Also, the Regeneron in the US is probably the top STEM competition in the country, where the Regeneron ICEF is great just also for international students and the teams, and they look at the awards at the ICEF. So there are your competitions. I presume that you have already participated in science fairs, your regional and state competitions, and that you've placed in those. Okay, next slide, the summer programs. In your secondary school, even your middle school, you should have in the summer participated in an online or residential summer program that is heavy in the area that you're interested in pursuing at university level. Now, some of these CTY programs, there are so many opportunities from the Hopkins program on multiple campuses And I'm sure that there is a campus near you that would have a CTY program. Some of these, now Yale, if you're interested in a STEM program, go to a summer program that focuses on those STEM things. Now, Stanford's math camp is very fine. These summer programs, you have to apply in early fall to get in because they are noted to be the best, and their classes are filled by Christmas, by the holiday. All right, last slide, organizations. For other information, look at their information online and what they offer and how they might help you and what information they may have that I didn't present to you or you didn't know about. Remember that you have a high school counselor who is counseling usually many students, and they are so busy, sometimes they're even teaching courses, that they can't stay on top of what's going on in some of the organizations, in some of the universities. Now, the good thing, for instance, about Thomas Jefferson High School here in Northern Virginia, it's very, very fine. But the schools are not going to take all the applicants from Thomas Jefferson to the university. And some schools are known for their students gaining admission to the universities. Now, it may be you want to look at which students in your school got into the top universities and colleges, who wrote their recommendations at that school. Remember, God helps them who help themselves. If you don't believe in God, you got to believe in yourself. So there are so many issues to think about when you're preparing your file, preparing your application, and you don't home in on just one section. It all has to fit together to do the story about you. And as I said, it must sell you. There is no such thing as a fine student just getting in and writing the application the week before. No, doesn't happen. And remember, your application is read several times at every university. You're going to get a fair shake. However, you also must know that everyone who's vetting those applications is a person who may have been doing it for years, really might not want to take too many students from one state. Now, you know, the good thing about being from Montana, Wyoming, New Mexico, they're not getting as many applications from those states, and they're looking for geographical distribution, as well as certainly gender distribution. But they're also looking for students first-generation students who have overcome adversity and talked about it in his or her essay. It's a difficult time for universities right now in trying to find the balance that is expected of them. And there is no panacea for defining excellence. And right now, schools that are having difficulties with the claims of discrimination against Asians, not having enough underrepresented. You know all of that. You've heard all of that. Focus on you. It's you need to worry about, not anybody else in your class, not anybody else. It's how am I going to sell me? How am I going to tell them I'm the best fit for their school and I will contribute to the student body and take advantage of some of the organizations or activities that you really like at that school? Okay, I have finished. I know there are so many questions, so many things I did not cover as fully as I would like. I've been doing this for over 40 years. I have never seen a more difficult time for students as last year and this year. In terms of students, what are they looking for? There are pluses and minuses in each. You don't want to go to a school where there's tremendous turbulence. You don't want to attend a school where you're going to have so many difficulties because of the challenges. They don't have money for certain courses, or a group of students is closing down the school for a week. It's your responsibility to do the research. Certainly get your parents involved with your file. They may not have gone to undergraduate school, but they've nurtured you and they have common sense because they're living and they are successful. All right. Good luck with your application. Devin will take questions. I can answer a few. And then, because Lyceums is a wonderful program for activities and opportunities for you, I hope you are all involved with Lyceums, and he will have a big new initiative that he will be announcing soon. So Devin, I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you,
Thank
students, for your attention.
Yes, and thank you, Joanne, so much for your insightful information. I know that it was helpful. I wish that I would have gotten some of this information when I was applying to college. So, this is very insightful. There is one question, but it is RSI related, so I'll be sure to make note of that and answer that offline so that we can get that question answered for you. But were there any questions for Joanne in regards to her presentation that you may have? And if not, that's okay. I do know that we are a little bit short on time and we have to get this show rolling. And so if you do have any questions after, please feel free to email me. I'm the one that's sending you all the emails, so please feel free to email me any of your questions. I can try to tackle some of them, and if not, then I will be sure to give them to Joanne so she can get an answer for you as soon as possible. So please, please, please email me. I'm taking note of that RSI question right now, though, and so
Well,
I'll
if
be
it's an
sure.
RSI question that I can answer, I will tell you. You know, Admiral Rickover and I started this organization, and RSI is our core program. It is most successful, internationally renowned for excellence, very difficult to get in, but the team that vets the applications is also looking for a student not so focused, or focused in an area, particularly if you are in math, very focused student, but that you have participated in other activities to nurture and make your field more mature. So, and we look for geographical distribution as well. And we also know when you're urban, perhaps the lack of opportunities for mentorship sometimes. We're looking at schools that may not have the SAT, ACT help. So every student is so carefully considered for RSI. And it's a wonderful program, but only 100 students can attend each year. Devin, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No worries. So I see all of these questions and I do have to continue, but I have taken note of them. And so any question that you answer, if I don't answer it, or you can email it to me and I can answer it then because we are on a time crunch and I want to make sure that Joann is able to go and that you all are able to go. And so I will make sure to answer those questions as I write down this last one. Um, so that I can get you an answer to that question as soon as possible. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and eh, um, I will send you an email, thank you email that will have my email for that question that just asked, can I have your email? You will receive an email tomorrow, just saying thank you for attending, and so you'll get my email that way. And so let me share my screen so we can continue this show. Let me
And Devin, thank you for the opportunity that you made for me to speak to your Lyceum students.
and we
I've
thank
enjoyed it.
We thank you for participating. We know that Lyceums would not be here without without you. So we thank you for participating. And so with that, I'm just going to say thank you so much to all of our sponsors, including the Claude Moore Charitable Foundation. And again, thank you to Miss Joann DiGennaro for one being our president for CEE and then also talking to you a little bit more about colleges and college applications. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. And please make sure that you visit cee.org/program/program initiatives to register for the next webinars hosted by STEM Lyceums. And you will receive a notification when this recording is posted on YouTube. So be on the lookout for that and on the lookout for our next upcoming webinar, which is actually going to be October 2nd. And it's going to be advancements in medical genetics. So please make sure if you haven't registered for that, register for that. You will be receiving an email for that as well. But again, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day.